Fabulous. That's what I like to hear. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today, most of you who have met me or have seen me speak here before know me as the host of the Hemel Property Network, and I'm usually coming here just to give you updates on legislation or the change, obviously, in temporary laws with coronavirus. Well, not today. I do wear another hat, and basically that's working on the front line with landlords, tenants, letting agents and eviction specialists in regards to rent arrears and problem tenants. Now, basically my history is 25 years in property, and 6 of those years I went over to the dark side and I worked for the Citizens Advice as a housing and homeless law specialist. And this is where I honed some fantastic skills that has enabled me to carry on and do the work that I'm going to talk to you about today. So first of all, I run a company called Gothard Row. Now, that's been established for 11 years. Basically, what I do is originally it was a property management company. I had 500 properties that I managed, and I sold that portfolio in 2011, but kept the company name. That company now provides a bespoke service, which includes alternative rent arrears resolution, mediation, service of eviction notices, tenancy setup, and referencing. Now, like I said, who do I actually provide this service for? Now, predominantly is landlords, but I also work with letting agents, and more recently I've started working with eviction specialists. This was specifically because with the lockdown and the ban on evictions, eviction specialists were literally sitting there and there was nothing they could do. They could serve the notices, obviously, but with the courts closed, there was nothing anyone could do with regards to what issues tenants were having. So I now support eviction specialists with regards to tenants that have got rent arrears, where the landlord may not want them to move out straight away. They want to try and get that money back. A money claim online wouldn't necessarily be the right option, or claiming from benefits may not be the right option. So what I'm going to talk to you about, I've got 4 very quick case studies that I'm going to go through with you and just explain what the situation was, what the outcome was, and then I'll talk about how I did it. So problem number 1 was an individual landlord who had one single buy-to-let. The tenant in the property had 4 kids and the partner was in prison. And the rent arrears were 5,600. And what this landlord wanted basically was the money. They weren't worried about the eviction, they just wanted the money. So obviously you're thinking, that's a lot of rent arrears, how am I going to do that? So what I managed to achieve was getting those rent arrears paid. Now, I did that via charity grants, discretionary housing payment from the council, and universal credit. Obviously there was no eviction, so that's minimal cost to the landlord, and my invoice to them was £350 for that work. Problem number 2, landlord had inherited a property, and with that property came a lodger. Now, this was a bit of a complicated one because the person who inherited the property was the daughter, and the mother had passed away, but she never moved into that property. So the lodger on that day in 2013 became a tenant overnight. Poof. Now, the landlord was unaware that she was now a landlord in that respect, and she had literally done nothing with regards to compliance. Nothing was in place, and the lodger was elderly as well. Now, this had been picked up by the council when social services had got involved, and the council were threatening her with a 30 grand fine for all of the non-compliance that she hadn't carried out. All she wanted was the lodger evicted. Now, Section 21 was not going to happen because she hadn't got any of the compliance in place, and there was no rent arrears, so we couldn't look at Section 8. So I worked directly with the council and social services and took the landlord out of the equation. I forced the social services department to do a full assessment of the tenant, and they agreed that he was not capable of caring for himself anymore. He was 83 years old, and eventually they agreed to rehouse him. Now, we did that via a deed of surrender. So again, didn't need to go to court. So minimum cost to the landlord. The fine was avoided because they realised just what a poor state that the poor tenant was in. So again, minimal cost to the landlord, and my fee for that job was £500. Problem number 3. Fully managed single let property. Now, there's a letting agent involved here, fully managing the property. Tenant, single male, self-employed. That's important. Rent arrears, 2,250. 3 incorrectly served Section 21s. What does the landlord want? Eviction and the money back. So I'll just go into the Section 21s. So the first Section 21 was served in April, and it was served with 2 months notice. Now the law changed on the 26th of March that it had to be 3 months notice. So they didn't really understand that until they tried to cobble together their paperwork for court and realised, oopsie, it should have been 3 months. So then they tried to serve another Section 21, and although they served the correct 3 months, they got their dates in a pickle. So unfortunately, when it was again putting the paperwork to go to court, they hadn't got the right dates, so it was an invalid Section 21. And then when they finally served the third Section 21, although they served again 3 months notice, they served it after the 29th of August, which it should have been 6 months notice. So all of this time, this poor landlord has just lost and lost and lost, and the tenant isn't paying rent. So the outcome for this, I got all the rent arrears paid. That was via 2 charity grants, the tenant applying for universal credit, a discretionary housing payment from the council, and support from SAFA. Now, why SAFA? After having a conversation with the tenant, first of all, finding out about his self-employment, he was a self-employed photographer, so hence all of his work had dried up. That's where the 2 charity grants come in. But I also said to him, if you've got no money coming in, how are you putting food on the table? That was the key question. And he basically said, oh, I've got a bit of an army pension. It was a throwaway comment. As soon as I heard that, I was like, we can sort this out. Picked up the phone, spoke to SAFA, and a combination of the 2 charity grants, which were there to support freelance journalists and freelance photographers. And obviously with him being self-employed, and we all know John down the pub had told him he couldn't apply for universal credit because he was self-employed. A combination of getting him on universal credit and the direct payments to the landlord, the 2 charity grant applications, discretionary housing payment, and an additional payment from SAFA, we were able to clear all those arrears and have him be able to sustain the rent payments moving forward and have additional income to support him as well. Now, again, there was no need for an eviction there, so there was minimal cost to the landlord. The agent was disinstructed, and my fee for that was 600 quid. And the very last one, I promise you, number 4, landlord of a 4-bed HMO. All the tenants were failing to pay the rent from month 1. So the tenants had been moved in, they'd all paid their first month's rent up front. Come to month 2, no, complete radio silence and no rent. They had an independent property manager in place. Now, it's the first time I've really dealt with an independent property manager, and I hope it's the last, to be perfectly honest with you. So they're not a letting agent, they're not lettings trained in any way, shape or form. They've just decided to set themselves up as a property manager. And the arrears were building up really quickly. So we've got £6,700 worth of arrears here. What did the landlord want? She wanted all of the tenants evicted. The main problem I've got here is at this point, none of the tenants have got 6 months worth of arrears. So I'm really going to struggle with the Section 8, and they haven't got to 4 months of their AST, so I can't serve them a Section 21. Result, all of the tenants are now paying their ongoing payments. All the rent arrears have been paid off via 8 charitable grants, universal and discretionary housing payment. And I charged the landlord £1,000 for that because there was obviously quite a lot of work involved. So what I'm just going to talk about here is how I achieve these outcomes, because it all looks great on a screen, but how do I actually get this to happen? Now, communication obviously is the key here because I'm talking to the tenants. Now, what I have to start with is what does the landlord or the agent want? And then I have to work backwards from that, because it's no good me going in and saying, right, your tenant's got £1,000 worth of rent arrears, I can get that written off for you, I can get that paid, when actually what the landlord wants is the property back. So I need that is the first question I have to ask. Then I have to take the time to explore the tenant's situation. Now, my thinking on this is the landlord would not have a problem if the tenant didn't have a problem. So if I can solve the tenant's problem, I automatically solve the landlord's problem. And that's why I spend more time working with the tenant than I actually do working with the landlord and the options that the landlord has available to them. And then it's why are they not paying their rent? Now, obviously, I've only given you 4 examples this evening, but I've worked with an awful lot of clients in this same respect with regards to rent arrears, and I have not yet come across a tenant who won't pay. I've come across every tenant that thinks they can't pay, and that's the key, understanding they want to pay, but they just don't think they've got the money. And then I check entitlement to benefits. Again, like with the guy who was self-employed, he believed that he wasn't even entitled to a claim. So I sat down with him, showed him that he could. He then did the claim there and then online and got direct payments to the landlord from there on. And the key for me here is exploring charitable grants. Now, the thing that you probably don't realise is there's over 2,000 charitable grants, trusts and legacy funds available to people in the UK in need. Now, they've all got different types of criteria, and it's up to me to ask the right questions of the tenant to find which one or more of these charitable grants tick the box and can pay towards rent arrears. Now, this can come under so many different categories. So there are charities for illnesses and disabilities. There are local charities. There are utility companies that will actually fund rent arrears, even if you're not a customer of theirs. Obviously, there's hundreds of small armed forces charities and occupational charities as well. So my favourite is the Rainy Day Trust, and basically if you've worked in retail in any way, shape or form for more than 6 months, you can apply to it and they will help towards most things that you are struggling with. The weirdest one I've come across is the Vegetarian Society, and they actually ask for proof that you're a vegetarian. Luckily I haven't had to use that yet because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to prove it. Maybe I have to wave a steak in front of someone and see how they react. And then the other thing is really key is knowing local authorities, because local authorities do have funding pots available. The government gives them funding pots every year that they must use, otherwise they lose it. We know about discretionary housing payments, but there's also a prevention of homelessness fund. So a lot of councils will change the wording of this. They'll call it different things, financial inclusion, this, that and the other. So if you've got a portfolio of properties in a specific area, it's really worth just taking 20 minutes, half an hour out of your day, ringing up the local council and finding out what is available in case your tenants ever get into a position where they can't afford to pay the rent and they need support. Now, for me, obviously, the properties that I've spoken about to you this evening were pretty much all over the country. The tenant where her partner was in prison, that was up in Liverpool. I've got one in Boston, and that's not Boston, Massachusetts, that's Boston over here. Liverpool, like I said, Kent. So they're all over the country. So I don't know those individual local authorities. So I have to take the time to research those as well. I'm going to talk to you now just very quickly about the average timelines. So basically from start to finish with an eviction, you know that we've got service of notice all the way through the process. We've now got a review hearing shoved in because we've now got a change of the process since COVID, through to eviction. And obviously with lockdowns and everything else, we're expecting that to be approximately from start to finish 18 months. Now with what I do, which is the alternative option, obviously the case assessment, the contact and the interview with the tenant, the assessments, the budget sheets, the grant assessments, the grant applications, all of that, it's taken on average 2 to 3 months for me to achieve that and actually get the money in the bank for the landlords. Now, this is the thing that you're all thinking, yeah, come on, how does this actually stack up? So eviction, we know the process, but how much does it cost? Now, depending on how backwards and forwards you have to go with the eviction process, it can cost anything up to 3,500, depending on which eviction specialist you use, etc., etc. Now, with everything that I do, my landlords, letting agents and eviction specialists are coming out with an invoice around this figure, £200 to 1,500, depending on how complex the case is. So that's me, that's what I do. And if you have a problem tenant, contact me because I'm going to guarantee you I can solve it in one way or another. Thank you.
Wow, that was fantastic, Julie. I think Richard's. I've got a few questions of my own, but I'll open it to the floor first. So Richard, would you like to ask a question?
Hi, Julie. Wow.
Hello.
Good results. Can you follow up on debts of former tenants, not just current ones?
No, I can't. It is current tenants that I work with because basically the threat of eviction or the threat of homelessness is usually one of the key in the criteria of these grant applications.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what surprised me, Julie, was you talked about 2,000 grants being no, not 2,000 grants, 2,000 charities offering grants.
Yeah.
That even in itself is quite amazing, but more than that really was your success in getting the grants actually. I think you've done so well, and I think the other point that you made at the end, which is it can take 6 months using the legal process, and you're doing it in sort of 2 to 3 months. Obviously, if you can get a result and get it a resolution quicker, then you haven't got like 3 extra months of debt building up and a bigger problem. So that if you can resolve it, more swiftly, that's good for everybody, really. So I think you've done really well. I'm not sure how you keep up with 2,000 charities and understanding all the legislation around it. How do you do that?
Well, I think for me, legislation is always something that gets me excited anyway. I think I've demonstrated that with some of the times when I've been on here talking about the changes. But I'll just get my secret weapon for you.
Oh,
So I have this. Grants
right.
for Individuals in Need. This big old thick book has all of them in there.
Wow. But you still got to find the right ones, Julie.
Still got to find the right ones, but the more I use the book, the more I read the different grants and the more I know, all right, that was on page so-and-so or that was under that. So the more you use the book, the more you understand which grants will work and which grants won't.
And what sort of, do you need to be registered or qualified, or could anyone just set up and do what you do, or what sort of qualifications do you need?
No, you don't need any. You just need a bit of patience, really, and a lot of post-it notes. I'll say that's definitely what you need. I learned about this book when I worked at the Citizens Advice, and it was my go-to fix for pretty much everything. One of the stories that I have when I was at Citizens Advice, a young lass came in. She was put into a new property by the council because she was previously homeless. But of course, those properties are completely empty, don't even have curtains up, no carpets. She couldn't feed herself because her benefits hadn't kicked in yet. So one of these grants that I managed to find actually funded for her to have a month's worth of Meals on Wheels. So she was actually getting a hot meal at least once a day, every day. So it doesn't necessarily have to be for rent arrears, but it has to be for a need. So they have to be in need. But yeah, I mean, pretty much you get to know that book quite well, and they update it every couple of years. And it's really important to get the updated one because sometimes these charities or these legacies will close, they'll run out of money, etc., etc. So
I think my last question is, so if I was a tenant and through poor money management or poor behaviour or whatever, I got into a debt, and you come along and basically solve my problem and take that debt away, where's my incentive to actually continue paying rent in the future? Because if I just get into debt again, I can just phone you up and you'll sort it all out for me.
well, one of the conversations that I have with the tenant is the fact that this is a one-time only opportunity. So the issue with these grants is you can't keep applying for them because they are only small charities and legacies. They don't have a bottomless pit of money. They're not like sort of Shelter, which have got, millions and millions of pounds in the bank. They're sort of running around, maybe the 50 grand, if not lower. So when I talk to the tenants, when I explain to them what I'm going to do, it's a case of I'm only doing this if you sustain the payment. So if they go on to universal credit, they have to have a direct payment going to the landlord. If one of the terms of me doing this with them is they want to sign a new AST, then we would only sign a 4-month AST, which is the length of time we'd need to serve a Section 21 anyway. So we're giving them little bits of olive branch, but we're basically saying, if you mess up again, then it's no. This is basically to fix the problem and help you move forward to sustain your accommodation, and obviously allow the landlord to carry on having an income.
Yeah, I think you're doing a good job for both really, for the landlords and the tenants. So well done you. Can you just put your info on? Just share your info on the screen again, please, Julie. So we just had something put on the Norris put that in the chat. Just wanted your contact info, so that'd be really good. Any other questions for Julie before we move on to Danielle? So you can take a screenshot of that, Ori, or if you just write that down, that'd be really, really good. Okay. Always really interesting, Julie, and it's really good tonight. So well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll just, if you can release your screen, and I'll hand over to Danielle. Now, as I said in the introduction, Danielle's an expert in capital allowances, and I know from previous discussions with her that you know, how valuable they can be, and it's not particularly well understood even by accountants. So very, very much looking forward to Danielle's presentation.